What would you say to an extra $11,000 per year or an extra $900 per month? Sounds tempting? Then let's talk about your car, because that's how much the average person in the US spends on a car. The numbers in the UK and Germany, because I'm German, are slightly lower, but the principles remain. So let's talk about the 3 types of costs of a car, the 3 options to get a car, which is mainly buy, finance and lease. And number 3, what you can do to keep the costs low, including a rule of thumb of how much you can afford. Hi, I'm Sophia. I had to sell my car about a year ago and it made me very sad. But it also saved me a lot of money in that year because I chose to not replace it yet. I did that so I could build wealth instead, which by the way I also love to talk about. And now let's dive in. The 3 types of prices of a car. Number 1 is the buying price, which is the price the car costs at the time you acquire it. So cars depreciate in value over time significantly. That's no news, you already know that. Just to put some numbers on it, after 5 years it's about worth half of the buying price. And after 10 years it's worth around 10 to 20% of the initial price. But when we take a closer look at the first 5 years of the car, so of the value depreciation curve, the curve is the steepest in the first year. So in the first year, a car loses up to 30% of its value. And after that, it still keeps falling, but the curve becomes like less steep. And then after year number 2, it's more about 15 to 20% per year. So when you buy a new car for $40,000, after just 1 year driving it, it's worth $28,000. Now that's a significant amount of money, wouldn't you agree? And that's why the first valuable tip on saving money on a car is to not buy it new. So I watched a few other videos on the topic, and some say that the sweet spot of buying a car is between 3 and 5 years old. Now I personally think that this is already too old. Let me tell you why in a minute. So the second type of price is the selling price. So this is how much you still get for the car when you sell it later. Now for a car older than 8 years, let alone 10 or 13 years, you don't get much money anymore. And not just that, the car repairment bills get so expensive after a few years. And I think the other factor is safety, because cars get developed all the time, not just in like efficiency, but also with safety features. And also the longer you drive a car, the higher the probability is of something breaking in the car because of wear and tear. Now the problem is when you drive the car too short, then the cost per year driving it are very high. But when you drive it too long, the repairment cost might exceed the actual value of the car. And then additionally, you cannot sell it anymore for much. And this is maybe just like a psychological factor. And I don't know about you, but for me, the ideal scenario would be that I sell my car for a price that is maybe around 30% of the buying price for the next one. That would be nice, because then the capital you need, for the new car seems less. Of course, it's not really less, but it just seems less if you still get a decent selling price. But of course, financially, so just from a numbers perspective, the longer you drive a car, the lower the costs per year get. And now let me get back to why I think 3 to 5 years is too old. Because the steepest depreciation in price is in the first year, and after that it gets less. And because of that cost per year thing, we want to drive a car at least 5 years, maybe 5 to 7 or 8 years. And that's why I personally think the sweet spot is rather 1 to 3 years old, because then the highest depreciation is already gone, but it's also not too old at the time when you sell it again. So if I would buy a car right now, I would choose a 1 to 3 year old car. And the third type of cost are the running costs. The thing is that we often concentrate so much on the buying price of the car, but actually it's just the tip of the iceberg. And the rest of the iceberg are the non-obvious costs. I say non-obvious because I would not call them hidden costs, because they're not really hidden. I mean, we know that we have to pay for them, but I think still we often underestimate how much it really is. Because costs of up to $11,000 per year turn a $40,000 car into a $51,000 car. So what are those costs? These are taxes and registration. There's not really a way around that. Then there's insurance, also not really a way around that. Then there is gas. That obviously depends on how much you drive every year. Then there's parking. And those little things often go unnoticed because, it's these little payments here and there. But if we wanted to be very transparent, these have to go into our whole picture of the car. Then there are car repairs, and they might be smaller in the beginning and also way less frequent, hopefully, in the beginning. But also those, they add up over time, and the older the car, we already talked about that, the higher these payments get. And if you finance the car, then there's also the interest rate. And that brings me to number 2, the 3 options of getting a car, which is buy, finance, and lease. Let's start with buy. Buy means when you pay for a car outright. And financially, this is the best option long term. You have no risk of loan because every type of personal debt adds risk for us. You have no monthly payments that otherwise could tie you for years, except for the running costs that we just talked about. But running costs always come up when using a car. Another factor, you do have ownership in the car, so it's yours and you can use it to your liking. And there's only the risk of damage of the car, but that's usually covered by insurance. Then there's the option of financing a car, which simply means that you take out a loan in order to be able to pay for the car. Now, I'd say the main reason to finance a car is because you don't have the money to pay for it outright. Or if you're maybe a complete numbers person, you ran multiple models and you think you can beat the interest rate of the loan with a return elsewhere. Now, my bet is that 99% of people arguing like that, they don't actually put the money to work elsewhere. Instead, they spend it otherwise. But hey, now the advantage is that if you really need a car, for example, to get to your job because you have a commute and there's no other way for you to get there, then financing a car allows you to get one even though you don't have the money down. Now, the way I think about this is that this is in fact the only scenario where it makes financial sense to finance a car. Because then you use the car to go to your work where you earn the money to then pay for the car. Because the cons of financing a car is that personal loans add risk and that you have monthly payments over years and the interest rate on top. And then we have a lease. Now, leasing a car is basically renting a car. Like you maybe rent your apartment, so you pay the owner to use the apartment. By leasing a car, you pay the company that owns the car, and in exchange, they let you drive it for a few years. And usually, cars for leasing are new cars. And remember, the depreciation of the car was the highest in the first year. Now, when does this make sense? Leases are usually less expensive than a loan. And because of that, it might make sense financially when you use it short term. So let's say, for example, someone gets a job that is 1 hour drive away, and this person plans to stay at this job for 3 years, but then afterwards plans to not commute to this job anymore and also plans to not have a car. But when we think long term, so when you actually want to drive a car for the rest of your life, or at least the next, 10 to 20 years, then financially, leasing is not the best option. On the contrary, it's probably the most expensive of them all. And that is because you never have ownership of the car and you pay for the depreciation in the time where it's the highest. So, the steepest curve. Now, when does this make sense? I personally think that when you are a person who doesn't like the fluff of owning a car and all the organizational stuff that comes with it, and also the selling it later, when you don't want that, or also if you want to drive the newest cars every couple of years, then I get that. The first part gives you peace of mind, and the second part is, I guess, a luxury choice you make. So if someone decides, I want to drive the newest cars every few years, and I also want the service of not having to take care of anything. So if something comes up with the car, I just call the lease company and then they take care of everything. And for all of that, I pay a premium. That's totally fine. I think it's just important to be aware that this is a premium you pay on the already luxury of having a car. And you should probably not try to convince yourself or others that this is the cheapest or best version, because it's not. And also, leasing can get expensive because they have all types of fees. Like fees when you drive it for longer or for more than the lease agreement says. Also penalties for wear and tear. So when it looks more used than it should. Leasing a car may have advantages when you buy it within a business, because then the payments might be at least in part tax deductible. So for a business, other rules or argumentations may apply. And that brings us to number 3, what you can do to keep the cost as low as possible. Now the very first one, and please don't skip this part, ask yourself, how often do I use the car and is it really worth the price? I loved to have a car. It's a great luxury. It gives me a sense of freedom, to know that you can just walk out of your door, get into the car and go anywhere, anytime. I just love that feeling. But then I did a reality check. And the truth is, I live in a city, so everything I need, I can either walk there or take a bus or the subway. And for longer distance things, I can just take the train or I can take a flight. There really are no limitations for me when it comes to public transport. And even for the very rare occasions, like, I don't know, I get stranded somewhere in the middle of the night and there's no bus or subway anymore, I could take a taxi. Now you might think, what? She tells me about saving money on a car and now talks about taking a taxi? But the thing is, taking a taxi once or twice a month or whenever will probably cost you way, way, way less than owning a car. So after doing this reality check, I decided to not immediately replace my car with a new one, because for me, the costs outweigh the benefits by far. But if you really need a car, like we already talked about, for commuting to work every day, then it's a good idea to buy a used car. My personal sweet spot, 1 to 3 years old, because then you avoid the very high depreciation in the beginning, but then also drive it for several years, ideally 5 to 7 or 8 years, because that reduces the overall cost, and the longer you drive a car, the less the cost per year becomes. But not too long either if you want to still get a decent selling price. And also because of the safety aspects or safety features of newer cars, and to avoid the rising repairment costs of a car that's already several years old. And then buy it outright to save on the interest and only take on a loan, so only finance it when there's really no way around it. Now when it comes to the running costs, let's start with insurance. You could compare insurance policies and then choose the one with the lowest price that still has enough coverage. To be honest, I think you can save a few bucks. I don't think this is what moves the needle. When it comes to gas and parking, same thing. I think you can save a few bucks when you are mindful about it. But also here, I don't think this moves the needle. What does move the needle, beside not using a car at all, is choosing a car that fits your financial capacity. And a rule of thumb is that the car you buy should not cost more than 10 to 15% of your annual net salary. And that includes everything. So the running costs, and if you finance it, the monthly payments and also the interest. So let's say your net annual salary is $40,000. Now I need a calculator. So with a net salary of $40,000 per year, the car should not cost you more than $6,000 per year, which is $500 per month. In case you have a car and you want to look at the cost from the past 12 months, I created a money tracker in Excel. It's the Excel sheet that I have used in the past 10 years to track my money. And there is a specific category just for transportation. So when you fill it out for the whole year, you can see your costs for the car at a glance. Please note, it's not a model to calculate and compare car finance prices. It's really a tool to track your income and all of your expenses, and your expenses for a car as one category of the total expenses. It's completely free. There's a link down below in the video description. If you're still here, thank you for watching this far, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.